Good morning, folks. Howdy, it's your boy Max Mogren reporting live for Wake Up News from here in beautiful Alpine, Wyoming with your Wake Up Wyoming. Thank you all for tuning in today. As usual, we're looking at the Jackson Hole Daily. As it mentions in the description, we're going to take a pretty good look at the Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington deaths today. Both those guys allegedly committed suicide by hanging themselves from doorways. Bennington dying on what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday. These guys were really close friends. Bennington was actually one of Chris Cornell's children's godfather. And so real interesting to look at these guys and the allegations that they committed suicide, also the counter arguments that these guys may have been killed because they were actively attempting to bring down a pedophile ring in Hollywood or within the music and entertainment industry. But we'll get into that as we go. We're going to look at the Jackson Hole Daily as usual. This newspaper, award-winning newspaper, they've got coverage of the Bennington death, so we'll get to that. Services the wealthiest county per capita in North America, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where the billionaires come to play. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to get right into it here. Again, we'll get to the Bennington deaths. If people want me to discuss those right away, put it in the comments. Let me know you just tuned in for that, and we'll get right to that. But otherwise, I'm going to go through my normal spiel here. We got 50 viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Wake Up Wyoming. As usual, the newspaper, I can't stress it enough. It's an incredible waste of paper. This is 70% advertising, 20% fluff, about 10% news. Pretty standard across the board of newspapers. So extremely frustrating that so many trees are killed every day just to spread commercial messages, distractions, diversions, and lies. Heartbreaking, especially when you consider that we could be making these things out of hemp, right? Hemp could replace all of our lumber tree processing, paper mills. Thank you all for tuning in. We got one comment. Amanda McPhillips, what up, Chicago? Thanks for tuning in. So, local news, a viewer of bison wins on appeal. This guy, some activists were trying to watch. It's a local story, but it's important. This guy, they were trying to watch the sheriff's deputies and government employees as they were herding wild herds of bison into Yellowstone Park. And he won in court. They basically told him to get lost, that he couldn't be there. There's a good quote here. I just want to read this. The whole reason we have the First Amendment is so that people can observe what the government is doing and provide counter-narrative, Smith said. That's his lawyer. This applies not just to the government's Buffalo operation, but in everything the government does. Okay? Can't stress that enough. Hobby Holbrook, what's up? Thanks for tuning in. Donna Heiler, Bruce Johnson, thank you for sharing. But, you know, it's good to see that on the front page. It's absolutely right. Not only the government, but the corporations, the global banking cartel, all the people doing shady shit out there. Brad and Kayla Klein, hello from West Virginia. What's up? Thanks for tuning in. Another local story that's interesting. If I mention in every video how there's an extreme housing crisis out here, I can't stress it enough. In this newspaper, there are 7 pages of classified ads looking to fill jobs, right? But there's no place for people to live. It's a stark example of how gross economic inequality does not work, right? Even in the wealthiest county per capita in North America, the average person is just squeaking by. And because all of the housing's been bought up by these billionaires looking for tax breaks to evade paying state income taxes where they actually live, there's no housing for workers. But here we go. How to stop illegal short-term rentals in Jackson has been debated for over a year, and last week the town council unanimously okayed hiring an enforcement officer to monitor rental violations and other nuisance rules. Using technology the town bought to track short-term rental websites like VRBO and Airbnb, along with a new municipal process for prosecuting short-term renters in civil court, the new code enforcement officer has the tools necessary to begin ensuring compliance with ordinances that aim to preserve Jackson's residential neighborhoods for the local people, not tourists. Okay, it's a big issue here in Jackson Hole, where it's technically illegal to rent your house out on Airbnb if you're not within like a designated, commercial short-term rental zone in the county, right? So it's cool. They're finally cracking down on that. Hopefully that will provide some more local housing, but I'm not holding my breath on that. The Wyoming State reps are seeking college interns. Anybody out there in Wake Up News World want to go play mole within Senator Barrasso or Senator Cheney's offices? You can get in touch there and go wreak some havoc, so to speak. But good luck with that. Moving on to the opinion section. Again, we've always got the Obamacare, Trump care fiasco. It's in the opinion section every day. Trump, the perfect fall guy. Ooh, we got Tehran tuning in. Mo La Paris, thank you for tuning in. North Carolina, Louis Massey Jr., what up? Real Migo Struggle, and everybody, thank you for sharing. Denmark's in the house. We're all over the place. Thank you for tuning in today. The Democrats' new slogan, a better deal, okay? Whatever. But it's important to note that slogans and jingoism are huge, right? You repeat the same phrase long enough, and people will start to believe it. Trump's Make America Great Again. Well, the Democrats' new slogan is a better deal. So whatever. It's just important to note that Republicans and Democrats are two wings of the same bird. Same, shady bird doing the bidding of its handler. But that's your opinion section there. Not too exciting today. A lot more fluff. Liz Cheney seeking to revive Wyoming's uranium industry. That's all fun. Nuclear power. I have to say, the Fukushima situation is still going on. We're all, to some extent, being poisoned by Fukushima and by all of the nuclear testing that happened over the course of the last century, blowing up, I think something like 2,000 bombs the U.S. government blew up to test, not including the ones that were used to destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, the tail end of World War II. I think it's important to note when anybody, it's funny how often in the mainstream papers, even today, we still see all this Nazi bashing. Now, I'm not a Nazi sympathizer, but they always bring out World War II like it was this noble war where we saved the world from fascism, right? But we were dropping atomic bombs on people. I don't think there's anything more fucked up than that, right? So don't buy into the World War II hype. I saw there's another World War II glorification movie out in the theaters now called Dunkirk. I might go watch it just to see what Hollywood's putting out these days. Two, give us this illusion of a just war, right? There's no such thing as a just war. There's no such thing as a sensible war. There's no such thing as a reasonable, beneficial to humanity war. All wars are just stupid, period. All wars, as they say, all wars are banksters' wars. How did they end the Great Depression in the U.S.? With a war, right? All of a sudden, there was no money. The Federal Reserve, the private banking cartel that was put into power in 1913, pulled back all the money. Nope, no money for you. We're going to crash the economy and then ramp it up again with the war. Some people made a lot of money off the Great Depression. Moving along, the revolving door. Trump, the perfect villain, promised to drain the swamp. Well, he's not draining the swamp. Senator Maria Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington, said Bernhardt's nomination flies in the face of Trump's pledge to drain the swamp in Washington of influence peddlers. I'm afraid he's not draining the swamp. He's actually helping to fill it, Cantwell said. The League of Conservation Voters and other environmental and watchdog groups urged senators to oppose David Bernhardt's nomination as the Deputy Interior Secretary, second in command to Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, saying he has long lobbied for the oil and gas industry, mining companies, and other businesses regulated by the Interior. Bernhardt's list of conflicts of interest is extensive and should disqualify him from this position, 150 conservation groups said. Okay, standard BS. You know, it's like when you take a former CEO from Monsanto and put them in charge of the FDA. It's like when you take this guy who is a lobbyist for the mining industries, you make him second in command at the Department of the Interior. Standard BS. In the national and international news, one of Trump's key advisors, Jared Kushner, says, no, we didn't collude with Russia. Again, this is a huge distraction. Okay, I can't stress it enough. There's one little quote here I want to read out of this article. His statement was the first detailed defense from a campaign insider responding to the controversy that has all but consumed the first 6 months of the Trump presidency. Okay? Scandals. They love it. The mainstream media eats it up. Same with elections. You know, soon, within another year and a half, we're going to have all the election coverage ramp up. Next thing you know, it's going to be front page headlines about the upcoming election for 2 years leading up to it, as if it really matters who is in the White House, right? Trump wouldn't be in the White House if he wasn't on board with the powers that be, with the deep state. He may talk about it, but I haven't seen Trump, you know, he made all these promises to get elected, to rally the support of a lot of people who are actually pretty concerned, you know, with his comments about the Federal Reserve and all this stuff, but he hasn't actually done anything about it. Can't stress it enough. Thank you all for the great comments. Thank you, David Holmes and Reiki Channel, Lucas Warren, everybody else who shared this. Much appreciated. If not for you, I would just be a guy sitting here talking to myself. Okay, this is a good example. You know, like I said, Trump's the perfect villain. If the economy crashes, they can blame it on Trump. If we destroy the entire continent with drilling and pipelines, they can blame it on Trump. But in reality, he's just kicking the can down the road. But here we've got an article where the rhetoric, I'm not even going to read the whole article. I'm just going to read key words. Well, I'll read some of it. Appeased President Trump browbeat Republican opponents to his party's reeling health care bill Monday, asserting that his predecessor's signature overhaul has meant death. Okay? They got likely to go badly, undo, pointed, vow, confusion, frustration, lambasted, scrap. Obamacare is death. That's the one that's death. That's a quote from Trump. But the important thing to note here is that the rhetoric here, the word choices are, you know, they could have used different words to spin this in a different way. But the words they use, they call the president peeved. Instead of talking to his party members, he's browbeating them. His party is reeling, and Trump is asserting rather than stating. And likely to go badly, undo, pointed, vow, confusion, frustration, lambasted, scrap. Okay, the word choices that the mainstream uses put a powerful spin on a story that otherwise wouldn't be that big of news. The president was talking with Republicans about the health care bill, which is a distraction. Okay, this is a heartbreaking story, but there's a few questions it raises. The immigrants pleaded for water, wept in hot semi. Okay? Now, what's interesting here, there were 90 immigrants in this semi. If you followed yesterday, we know 8 people died in San Antonio in this overheated semi. But what's unusual is that when they showed up, there were still a lot of people there. These people were able to get out of the semi. The reason that the cops got called is because one of the people from the semi went into the Walmart and asked the Walmart employee for some water, right? But the unusual thing is they left the Texas border town of Laredo for the 150-mile trip north to San Antonio. And the unusual thing is that he stopped. By the time the driver stopped at the Walmart in San Antonio around midnight Sunday night and opened the door, as many as 8 passengers were dead, and 2 more would soon die in an immigrant smuggling attempt gone tragically awry. Okay, so yeah, it's hot in San Antonio at night, but if it was a 150-mile drive and they arrived around midnight, what time did they leave? Like, what time did all these people get into the truck and take off? Interestingly, the truck driver did not enter a plea, but in court papers he told authorities he didn't realize anyone was inside his 18-wheeler until he parked and got out to relieve himself. So the whole story, you know, that guy's probably lying. I would assume that you couldn't have 100 people pile into the back of your semi without knowing, but it just seems strange that you know, one would assume if you had all these immigrants and you were going to dump them in a Walmart parking lot in San Antonio, you would load them up, drive there, and turn them loose. But if he got there at midnight, I wonder how it was so hot in the semi. Assuming like a 3-hour drive, maybe they left at 9 p.m. And by that time, the sun is almost set. So it's just interesting. That story, you know, it gets my BS detector ringing a little, but not worth looking into too much. I'm sure there are some explanations, but just gets me asking questions as to what really happened. Here we see another classic Trump bashing story. Let's see if I can get that to show for you. Okay, what's it say? Can't read it. President Trump took a new swipe at Attorney General Jeff Sessions on Monday, referring to him in a tweet as beleaguered and wondering why Sessions isn't digging into Hillary Clinton's alleged contacts with Russia. Fuming about the ongoing investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election and questions as to whether his campaign colluded with foreign officials, Trump again focused his ire on Sessions, who was one of the president's closest allies. So why aren't the committee's investigators and, of course, our beleaguered AG looking into crooked Hillary's crimes and Russia relations? Trump tweeted Monday. Okay, so the president takes a swipe, right? He doesn't level a criticism. He takes a swipe. He's fuming, and he's meddling, and he colluded, and his ire. All these words, you know, there's a strong anti-Trump bias in the media, which I'm fine with, but it's just important to note that even the word choices themselves make it so blatantly obvious. Amitai Angor chiming in. I've just entered. I don't really know what is going on, but it looks too strange that they are both dead. I agree. And on that note, I'm sure we have more viewers than usual now because people are really interested in the Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington suicides or deaths. So let's get into that right now while we've got such a big audience. Okay, I'm going to read the local news coverage here. Lincoln Park said their hearts are broken following the death of lead singer Chester Bennington, who died by hanging last week. The rock band said Monday that the shockwaves of grief and denial are still sweeping through our family as we come to grips with what has happened. Bennington, who was 41, hanged himself from a bedroom door. Okay, a bedroom door. I don't know how you hang yourself from a door, but Chris Cornell hung himself from a bathroom door, apparently, too, in his home near Los Angeles. The band started the statement with, "Dear Chester, you touched so many lives, maybe even more than you realized. In the past few days, we've seen an outpouring of love and support, both public and private, from around the world. Talinda and the family appreciate it and want the world to know that you were the best husband, son, and father. The family will never be whole without you." Okay? So Chester Bennington, rest in peace. You know, mainstream rocker. He died, interestingly enough, if you look into the story a little more, Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog, and Chester Bennington were very close friends. Bennington played at Cornell's funeral, and Bennington actually died on what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday. Okay. Also, Chester Bennington was godfather to one of Chris Cornell's children. Now, Chester Bennington married with 6 children of his own. I find it hard to believe personally that these rock stars would kill themselves. Furthermore, I find it hard to believe that they'd be able to hang themselves from a doorway, right? Chris Cornell allegedly hung himself with a one of those elastic exercise bands. I'm going to show you a picture of it because I zoomed in on it. It's kind of cool. I can actually do this on the phone. So here is the Chris Cornell hanging scene allegedly. This is a picture posted by TMZ online. You see their watermark there? But he had that thing rigged up to the door in his bathroom in his hotel room in Detroit. It's one of those little rinky-dink exercise bands. And frankly, I don't understand how you would kill yourself with that. And maybe, I mean, it's possible, I suppose, but you'd have to, you know, you'd assume a guy like Chris Cornell, even if he was like sitting down or laying on the floor, that thing would pretty much stretch all the way to the floor, right? So it's interesting. Lucas Warren chiming in, there's no way it's a coincidence they both died the same way. This is a blatant cover-up. I agree. You guys are putting some great comments in there. Thank you. If we follow the story here, I think it's safe to assume that these guys didn't actually hang themselves. Now, it's interesting to note, Chester Bennington has previously acknowledged that he was a victim of child sexual abuse growing up. Chris Cornell started a foundation to help children who were abused. And in fact, I've got a few articles on the phone here I can read you some excerpts to. And it's also interesting to note that all of the mainstream press is lambasting these. They're citing Snopes and all these other BS. You know, I read the Snopes article. It's total BS. But they're basically dispelling any possibility that these guys could have been murdered as a hoax, as a debunked conspiracy theory with no foundation in fact. But this is interesting. In May, Chester Bennington, the wealthy, successful, married man with 6 children, the rock star, commercially successful millionaire with a wife and 6 children, in May he tweeted, "As of today, my life's purpose is one of love and understanding. The world needs to change, and that change comes from within. Hate, pride, vengeance, and fear are the plague of the earth. Love, kindness, compassion, empathy, and service to others are the cure." So that's what Chester said in May. He added a challenge to his followers on Twitter. "Let's all choose to be a part of the cure. If we look outside ourselves to find love and peace, we will ultimately fail. It has to come from within. Lead by example." Okay, so those are the words Chester Bennington tweeted out in May. Now he's dead, supposedly hung himself. Again, looking at the pictures of the Chris Cornell crime scene, let's call it a crime scene, I don't understand how he possibly could have hung himself with a little exercise band hanging from a door. Chester Bennington supposedly hung himself with a belt off a door. Now, if you think about it, you'd have to be pretty drunk or pretty doped up or pretty intent on killing yourself to hang yourself from a 6, what is this doorway? 7 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall doorway? Because you could just stand up and live, right? How do you prevent yourself from just standing up and saying, you know what, I'm dying, I should probably just stand up. Maybe it's not worth it, right? So interesting. People are saying Illuminati. Lucas Warren chiming in, "I absolutely hate Snopes. People who solely depend on it for information are lazy and fact-checking." Boom, exactly right. We all know Snopes is run by a couple people. Nobody with a rational bone in their body, nobody with the mind to process information and critically analyze things, can understand why anybody would accept Snopes as a more reputable source than some other organization run by 2 people, right? So there's a really good article on Your Newswire. Again, this is run by the People's Voice. I can't say it's 100% solid, but it was interesting. The parallels between the 2 deaths are astonishing. The close friends who were working to expose notorious entertainment industry pedophiles died the same way, with Bennington's death taking place on what would have been Cornell's 53rd birthday. Close friends say Cornell say that he was shown a black book that included the name of one of his professional associates. After setting up his foundation, this is Cornell's foundation to help children who have been abused, and investigating further, Cornell was close to exposing a network of pedophiles working within the entertainment industry, a dangerous job that he considered his duty. But his friends believe he was taken out before he finished his job. Okay. Nikki Sixx, interestingly, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue tweeted 4 days ago, "I am in tears. Chester just told me how happy he was. He was such a sweet and talented man. I feel so bad for his family, bandmates, and fans." So there's a fan of Chester saying he just said he was happy. The official investigations say case closed, suicide, but I don't think it's a suicide. We could go on and on with this. But what else? So a little bit more about Cornell's industry, or Cornell's, battery low. Hold on, I got to plug this thing in. Thank you all for tuning in. Apparently I've lost power here. There. We're back. Okay. So what did Chris Cornell's foundation do? This is coming from the LA Times, so this is fact. On what would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, the late Soundgarden singer's family foundation announced Thursday a $100,000 donation to a music therapy program for children in Seattle that will bear Cornell's name. Child Haven, a Seattle-based nonprofit, will use the donation to establish the Chris Cornell Music Therapy Program at Child Haven, described as a therapeutic early learning model for trauma-affected children. Chris's wife said, Vicki Cornell said, Chris and I have always shared a strong belief in the healing and inspiring power of music, and through Child Haven's establishment of this program, we will be able to continue to keep the promise for Chris to protect the world's most vulnerable children. The program uses music to treat children from birth to age 5 who have been affected by abuse, neglect, domestic violence, substance abuse, and other issues. Okay. Now, for those that don't know it, the music industry, the mainstream music industry, I'm going to turn that light off behind me. I got a great book here that I'm going to share with you, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. The mainstream music industry is, there we go, about as shady as the mainstream media in terms of news. This is a great book here written by another man who died under unusual circumstances named David McGowan. When Dave McGowan died, he was doing some really intense investigation of the Sandy Hook false flag staged event. And this book is called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Laurel Canyon, Covert Ops, and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. It turns out that the whole hippie movement in the mid-'60s that emerged out of Los Angeles, that brought us folks like Charlie Manson, Frank Zappa, Jim Morrison, the Mamas and the Papas, etc., was steeped in murder, pedophilia, Satanism, and assorted other shady shit. Also interesting is a lot of these pop music sensations that arose out of the 60s and 70s. Well, they died under unusual circumstances. You know, they call it a suicide when somebody is found beat to death, right? It's like, oh, he killed himself, but he's covered in bruises. We don't know how that happened. But the whole situation's real stinky. And even more interesting is a lot of these celebrities, a lot of these rock gods who are held up as being the leaders of the countercultural movement of the 60s. For one, they never wrote, none of them wrote an anti-war song. If you can find me an anti-war song by The Doors, I'd love to hear it. And number two, a lot of them, their families were closely linked to military intelligence, right? A lot of these people, like the most stark example, Jim Morrison of The Doors. You know, Jim Morrison supposedly, he always told people his parents are dead. My parents are dead. But Jim Morrison's parents weren't dead. Jim Morrison's dad was an admiral in the U.S. Navy. Not just an admiral in the U.S. Navy, but he was actually the commanding officer at the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where there's Jim on the deck of, or on the bridge of a ship with his father, just shortly before he became a rock star. And what does it say there? These days, especially in the States, I think you have to be a politician or an assassin or something to really be a superstar. Before he was the Lizard King, U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison and his son, James Douglas Morrison, on the bridge of the USS Bone Om Richard, January 1964. Okay? So Jim Morrison of The Doors, his dad was an admiral in the Navy, and his dad was the commanding officer at the Gulf of Tonkin incident, used to propel the United States into the Vietnam War. Kind of a big deal. But this book, chapter 3 here, goes into all these people who died under shady circumstances in Laurel Canyon. Interestingly, at the top of Laurel Canyon, at the bottom of Laurel Canyon was a Sunset Strip. At the top of Laurel Canyon, there was a top secret government film studio. Okay, and then all along the canyon, somehow all these kids who had ties to intelligence, to military intelligence families, suddenly started all these rock bands that took the nation by storm. And prior to that, what was there? There was folk music. There was Bob Dylan before he went electric, Bob Dylan before he sold out, that sort of stuff. But then the legitimate, real anti-war movement of the 1960s got taken over by the hippies. What was it all about? Well, the previous anti-war movement was like, hey, it was clean cut. It was suit and tie. It was, hey, we're all about, like, why are we wasting all this money killing all these people in Vietnam? Why don't we just not do that anymore? It was educated people doing that. And then the hippies showed up on the scene, and it divided the country between young and old, because you had these crazy drug-addled lunatics running around. And the anti-war movement, the hippies were associated by the mainstream media with the anti-war movement. The anti-war movement was discredited and demonized by the hippies, right? I have long hair, but I don't do a bunch of acid and run around naked downtown San Francisco, right? So, really good book, highly recommended. And like I said, the Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington suicides reek of a murder. Apparently, these guys were trying to use their influence, to go after elite high-level pedophiles. And I can't stress it enough, all the way back in the 60s, when the music industry produced the hippie movement, these bands that we're told were the great anti-war bands were put in, they were on the Smothers Brothers, they were on the Johnny Carson show because they were mainstream. The one song that's always held up, anytime there's a Francis Ford Coppola or who's that guy's name? Anytime there's a big anti-war movie, they always play that song by Buffalo Springfield. And for what it's worth, right? And if you actually listen to the lyrics, it's not an anti-war song at all. In fact, it's designed to scare the shit out of people who are trying to stand up to the government. Let's look at the lyrics. Paranoia strikes deep. Into your heart it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down, right? It doesn't get much more anti-protest than that. But that's the biggest protest song in the 60s, according to the mainstream. Moving along. Speaking of the occult, I'm going to read my horoscope. I don't put much stake in them, but it's in the newspaper, so it must be important. I'm having a 4-star day. You could be overthinking an issue and making a mountain out of a molehill. Once you let go of this matter, you will find that your ingenuity kicks in. I think that has to do with my personal life. Decide to drop the word problem from your academy, okay, or from your vocabulary. Ask a friend for feedback if need be. Tonight, kick up your heels. All right? Cool. I can do a little relaxing. Not a problem. Anybody else want their horoscope read? Lay it on me. I'm going to get back to the news now that we've covered the Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington tragic deaths. Okay? If you've never heard the song Hunger Strike by Temple of the Dog, I highly recommend it. That's Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell trading off lyrics before either of them were really famous, rocking it. And it's got a great message. Moving along. Okay, fluffity fluff fluff. I think we already covered this, but I'd stress it again. The bias against Trump in the media is so apparent. Again, I'm not a Trump supporter, but it's important to note, I think he's the perfect villain. President Trump took a swipe. He's beleaguered. He's fuming. He's meddling. He colluded, and he has ire. Okay, all these words not commonly used to describe the President of the United States. But what the hell? Business. Moving on to business. Index says mixed ahead of a busy week. Stocks mostly fell on Monday, and broad market indexes inched modestly backward at the start of a busy week of corporate earnings reports and a meeting of the Federal Reserve. Technology stocks, though, added to their big gains for the year and helped push the NASDAQ Composite to another record. The International Monetary Fund on Monday held its forecast for global economic growth this year steady at 3.5%, but then masked some movements underneath. It raised its forecast for economic growth in Europe, Japan, and China, but it also cut its outlook for the United States on the assumption that politicians in Washington won't be as helpful for growth as expected. The Federal Reserve's Policymaking Committee begins a 2-day meeting today, following its decision last month to raise short-term interest rates for the third time since December. The central bank also announced plans to start gradually paying its bondholders later this year, a move that could cause rates to rise. Investors in recent weeks have questioned whether the European Central Bank will begin to tap the brakes on its own stimulus of the economy. Okay, what's the stimulus of the economy? Well, we all know here in the U.S., same thing with the European Central Bank. We are in the midst of a program called QE Infinity, quantitative easing. What's the quantity? The quantity is the amount of money being given to the government and the large banks and huge corporations to boost the stock market, to fund deficit spending, to keep the endless wars going, and to keep the economy looking halfway decent when it's actually a dead man walking in this country, right? The reason that the wealth gains have gone to the wealthiest 1% since the economic collapse in 2008 is because all the money that's been gifted to boost the economy has been given to the government and the wealthiest people, the people that can afford to invest in the stock market. Stock market's at all-time record highs, right? But that's not reflected in the quality of life of the average American, that's for sure. The working class is not doing that well, but the wealthiest 1% are doing very well. So we'll see what happens. It's important to note, though, the Fed, a private, profit-driven banking cartel, has the power to crash our economy. They've done it many times before. So that sucks. Home buyers face surging prices and a shrinking number of properties for sale in June caused the pace of sales to fall. Sales of existing homes slipped 1.8% last month to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 5.52 million, the National Association of Realtors said Monday. The decline speaks of a troubling cycle for the U.S. housing market, hampered by a worsening shortage of properties to buy. Despite solid demand in a relatively healthy economy for houses, sales listings have been steadily declining for more than 2 years. The resulting shortage has caused prices to rise faster than wage gains, making it harder for more Americans to build up their net worth by becoming homeowners. Okay, blah, blah, blah. It's a crisis. There are about as many homes for sale now as there were in '94, except there are about 63 million more people in the country now than there were then. Okay. Interestingly here, they tag it in there. The resulting shortage has caused prices to rise faster than wage gains, making it harder for more Americans to build up their net worth by becoming homeowners. Okay, that implies that becoming a homeowner will build your net worth. What if you buy in at the top of the bubble like so many people did back in 2006, 2007 with some shady-ass sliding rate mortgage, and then you get foreclosed on? You have not built your net worth. It's not assumed that just buying a house is going to build your net worth, right? Why are housing prices at an all-time record high? Because the stock market's at an all-time record high. Housing prices I think they're at an all-time high. I'd have to double check that, but they've been rising. I think they're up nationally. They're up like 12% on the year for housing prices, which is insane. And what do we have? Well, here locally, I don't know how it is where you live. I'd be curious to know, but people can't afford rent. Rent's going up. Wages aren't going up. Rent's going up. The cost of housing is going up. Property taxes are going up. Wages are not going up. So we see, why is there a 12% increase in the cost of the average housing unit in the United States over the last year? It's inflation, right? You can buy a house and try to keep up with inflation, but if you buy a house right now, I don't know, do your research before you buy a house, because maybe the economy is going to crash again pretty soon, but I'm not sure. It's hard to say. It's hard to know what the economy is going to do when it's rigged by a private banking cartel and you don't have insider information. Okay, this is kind of a funny article here. Study, you can buy happiness. This is actually interesting. Washington, AP, yes, you can buy happiness, especially if the money saves you time. People who dole out cash to save time on things like housekeeping, delivery services, and taxis are a bit happier than those who don't, new research finds. Researchers surveyed more than 6,000 people in 4 countries and also ran an experiment, giving people $40 for 2 weeks. 1 week they had to buy something material like a shirt. The next week they paid to save themselves time. People said they felt happier after saving time than buying stuff. It goes on and on. It just keeps saying the same thing over and over again. Pay someone else to do the time-consuming drudge work that you don't like. For once, I'd have to say I agree with the newspaper here. If you think about it, if people, instead of buying another plastic spatula made in China or more silly clothing that is going to be out of fashion again in a couple months, instead of spending all your money on this consumeristic crap, you pay the neighbor kids to take care of your lawn, you pay someone to help clean your house with you or for you, you're stimulating the local economy. You're creating jobs for your neighbors and people that live in your community, rather than taking your money and just giving it to some faceless corporation that probably manufactures the products in some third world country, right? So arguably, if you spend your money, you spend your disposable income employing people in your community, that is a good thing. Interestingly, it's also good for the U.S. trade deficit. So apparently you can buy happiness. But of course, that entails having money. And arguably, money is the greatest conspiracy ever perpetuated against humanity. Right? So it's not very happiness inspiring to be stuck working to make money. It doesn't inspire happiness to be worried about money all the time. My financial situation might go totally haywire here in the next couple of days, but we'll just have to wait and see. Here's your classic divide article, black women picking up firearms for self-defense. Makes a race issue out of something that doesn't need to be. Could be about all women picking up firearms for self-defense, but black women dividing based on race and sex. Could be an article about how more Americans are picking up firearms for self-defense, but instead they're only looking at black women here. It's hard to find definitive statistics on gun ownership, but a study by the Pew Research Center released this month indicated that just 16% of non-white women identified themselves as gun owners, compared to about 20% of white women, 25% of white women. Other Pew surveys in recent years have shown a growing acceptance of firearms among African Americans. In 2012, one survey found that less than a third of black households viewed gun ownership as positive. 3 years later, that number had jumped. By then, 59% of black families saw owning guns as a necessity. Okay, it's interesting. I'd really love to dig deeper into these statistics, but I find it kind of absurd that over the course of a 3-year span, it went from 32% of black households viewed gun ownership as positive to 59% saying owning guns was a necessity. In 3 years, really, newspaper, the public opinion has shifted so far that it went from 32% thinking gun ownership was positive to 59% saying owning guns is a necessity. I don't know, man. It seems fishy. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with this article, but these numbers don't add up to me. That seems absurd. But it's important to note, if people, regardless of their color, think that owning a gun is necessary, why do they feel that way? Well, one, they're worried about a corrupt government persecuting all of us, be that in the form of the police or the military declaring martial law, right? Or they're scared of crime in their communities. And what causes crime? What really causes crime? It's extreme economic depravity and inequality. Okay, so if more people are buying guns, it's because A, the government's corrupt, and B, the private banking cartel that keeps our economy all topsy-turvy and fucked up is at fault. So it's sad that we feel the need, I've got guns, I'm ready to defend freedom, but I don't want to have guns. I didn't want to spend a couple $1,000 on a bunch of guns, but I did. Not because I'm worried about crime in my small town, but because I'm concerned about the government. And I've seen how they act. I was at Standing Rock. I've seen the police state in action, and it's fucking absurd. It's a disgrace, the way these police act, the things they do. It's an utter disgrace, the way they treat citizens in this country. And it's a disgrace that we live in a world of such gross economic inequality. We live in a world where the government imports cocaine and throws it into the hood and tells people, fight for it, right? Like, these things are all real. It's a sad, sad state of affairs. So, if you feel the need to get strapped, I don't know. Don't spend your last dime on guns, but I should probably do a video on firearms here pretty soon. If anybody's interested in that, let me know. Moving along. I haven't seen any comments in a while. I don't know if my comment stream is frozen. I'm seeing a lot of likes there, so I appreciate that. Here's a heartwarming story. Oh, my phone's blown up. I better check this. Ooh, the river. It's going to be good today. Good surfing. A medical marijuana businessman in Maine is offering weed for weeds in a program to encourage Gardner residents to clean up their city. Local TV reported that Dennis Meehan, owner of Summit Medical Marijuana, offered residents who collected trash Saturday free marijuana. The businessman said anyone who was ever over 21 was offered free marijuana if they presented a bag of trash that was collected in town. Meehan's company advertised the cleanup effort on Facebook, and he said he hopes to expand what he calls the Day of Service program to the entire state. Meehan said the program is about bringing awareness to the life-changing nature of cannabis as well. Gifting marijuana is legal in Maine. So, heartwarming story about a guy giving people the weed for cleaning up their town. Okay. Marijuana, the U.S. government owns the patent on marijuana as a treatment for cancer. Prior to it being demonized and made illegal, it was pretty much the #1 prescribed natural remedy by normal old doctors for a lot of diseases here in America. Then, right around the time when the pharmaceutical companies were getting going, marijuana demonized, shut down. Okay? Sad. Now, I think it's important to say, too, if you spend your whole life smoking dope, odds are you're not operating at your full potential. Odds are you're going to feel a little fuzzy, right? So, like any medicine, like any drug, marijuana can be abused. It's important to note that. Sports. John Elway staying on as GM for the Broncos. Oh, blah, blah, blah. We got guys racing cars, all sorts of fun things going on in the world of sports. So, can't stress enough, sports, celebrity gossip, mainstream pop music, like we saw coming out of Laurel Canyon back in the 60s with shitty bands like The Byrds, The Doors, The Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa. You might love Zappa, but show me a good Frank Zappa anti-war song and prove to me that Frank Zappa wasn't a complete, disgusting pederast. But that's your news. Mainstream pop, mainstream sports, mainstream entertainment. It's all a big distraction. Mainstream newspapers like this designed to distract, divide, and discourage, and depress, and deter. I mean, we could do all these D words, right? But that's your news, America. If you got a newspaper, it's great for starting a fire. It's great for wrapping up a dead fish. It's actually very good, perhaps the best thing if you want to wash some windows with a little Windex and an old newspaper. You get those things shining. But if you want to feel good about yourself, if you want to feel good about the world, you want to know what's really going on, a newspaper is not going to do that for you. And that's why we shred them. Here, Wake Up News. Again, I got friends that work at this paper. I don't mean to rag on you guys, but you're wasting trees. You're selling a line of BS disguised as the news. Thank you all for tuning in. We're entering the 50th minute. Unless I get some questions from people, I'm going to sign off. Again, I can't stress enough the excellent book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Laurel Canyon, Covert Ops, and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream by Dave McGowan. Rest in peace. It's funny, I actually got turned on to Dave's work because he was one of the few people out there calling out my former boss, the guy who taught me a lot, Mike Rupert. Made me take a second look at old Rupes. But rest in peace to you too, Mike. I love you. And that's it. I'm signing off. Y'all take care. One love.